Hello and welcome to the Race and Rights Podcast. This is Sahar Aziz, Distinguished Professor at Rutgers University Law School and author of the book The Racial Muslim, When Racism Quashes Religious Freedom. I also serve as the director of the Center for Security, Race and Rights, also known as CSRR. CSRR engages in research, education, and advocacy on law and policy that adversely impact the civil and human rights of America's diverse Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities. You can learn more about CSRR's work by visiting our website at csrr.rutgers.edu and also subscribing to our YouTube channel. In this episode of the Race and Rights Podcast, CSRR faculty affiliate Dr. Hiba Khalil is the guest host, where she interviews an American trauma nurse who went to Gaza in 2024 to provide urgent medical care to Palestinians severely injured by Israel's year-long military assault on 2.4 million civilians. Let's hear what our guest has to say about this important and urgent issue affecting all Palestinians.
Hello, welcome to the Race and Rights Podcast, presented to you by the Center for Security, Race and Rights at Rutgers Law School. My name is Hiba Khalil, and I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Nebraska Wesleyan University. I'm also an affiliate faculty with the Center for Security, Race and Rights at Rutgers Law School. And today I will be your guest host. It's been a year since Israel started its genocidal war on Gaza. And while there is so much to unpack about this genocidal war, particularly in terms of media blackouts, the dehumanization of Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim lives in Gaza, and now, unfortunately, in Lebanon as well, today we want to talk about the intersections of healthcare and access to health and medicine and racism, particularly racism against Black, Brown, Arab, and Muslim bodies. And with me today is a very special guest. I'm talking today to Willie Masay, who is a Tanzanian Muslim-American critical care and trauma nurse from Omaha, Nebraska. And he's going to be sharing in a very personal conversation his medical mission to Gaza. Willie just returned from a 6-week medical mission as a critical care and trauma nurse in Gaza, where he spent a lot of time in North Gaza, but also visited some hospitals in southern Gaza. And we're going to be talking about his mission today. Willie is also about to depart to another medical mission in southern Lebanon to help set up medical hospitals or field hospitals there amidst the Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon. Willie, I'm honored to be talking to you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Hiba. Thank you.
You just returned from a 6-week medical mission to Gaza, and I want to ask you, why did you decide to go to Gaza?
Because I saw death, destruction, and devastation on social media. And I have been to Gaza before, and I heard from my friends of what is happening. And as you know, Israel blocks humanitarian aid, food, and aid workers. So I wanted to make sure that I want to go and help. I think it's the common denominator among humans that we are called to serve. I think all of us are. And we know that 5 out of 6 people trying to go into Gaza have been denied or are denied by the Israelis. And I know it was going to be a tough time because I've been trying to go and since the beginning of the genocide, but I was finally able to go in.
Thank you so much for sharing this. Can you describe the medical and health situation that you observed on your 6-week-long medical mission in Gaza?
As I said earlier, there is very little available in Gaza in terms of medical supplies, medical personnel. Local doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals have been displaced, or some of them have been killed by the Israeli forces. So the lack of supplies and personnel is astronomical. It is devastating to see it. We did not have a lot of equipment like gauzes, central line catheters, or dressing changes, wound changes. We did not have, enough oxygen. Sometimes patients we had to bag them in the ICU because there was no oxygen until we find the small oxygen tanks from the hospital. So it's very, very difficult to imagine the lack of equipment and supplies. Remember that also every 4 weeks, at least around 72 international aid workers are allowed to go in. And that number has gone down since then. So with the lack of equipment and supply, with 72 going in at a particular moment, international aid workers, that is 31,000 people per one aid worker going into Gaza. So the situation is catastrophic.
Absolutely. And we also know that aid workers, healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, as well as journalists and teachers, professors have all been targets to Israeli airstrikes and bombardments. So the presence of these international aid workers is absolutely needed. It's crazy to hear that only 72 are allowed every month, which, you calculated into one aid worker per 31,000 people. That's putting it into perspective is it's really sad. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things, and I'm sure there are so many things you don't want to think about again, but what kinds of cases did you see and treat as a medical professional during your 6 weeks in Gaza, and what stayed with you in what you saw?
Single gunshots to the head and to the chest or to the lower extremities of a child, men and women. Those single shots, you can tell they are a killer shot done by a well-trained Israeli sniper, because when they were aiming for the chest, they really wanted to dismantle that child and kill that child right in the heart. I've seen also single shots in the neck, completely killing that child on an instant. So these are not just some random shots or some random untrained personnel. This is deliberate. It's a war crime. It's something that it's done on purpose. There is no way around it because of the accuracy to the heart or to the head or to the femoral artery on the lower extremity. So that what it does is completely cut off the blood supply and the patient will bleed to death within minutes. That is not of a shot from an amateur soldier or a person. This is a well-trained sniper or Israeli armed forces.
Of course, we know that the United Nations, whether through the WHO or through the UNICEF, but also through the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, have well-documented evidence of what you're talking about. But we're also going to talk about a letter in which you and other medical professionals from the United States have shared some of that evidence with the US State Department. We'll come to that. I'll ask you about that later. But back to your time in Gaza, what was it like to be an American medic in Gaza during these times when the United States is not only actively funding Israel and Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, but also vetoing ceasefire resolutions one after one, 4 in total so far in the last year since October 7th of 2023. So what was it like to be an American medic in this situation? Of course, a Black and Muslim American medic, those are important pieces as well.
Frightening. I could be killed at any moment. In healthcare, we have that old tradition, as old as humanity, where healthcare providers are a protected group, but not during this genocide. You are a target. We are a target. We were told that you will be killed your life away.
And who told you this?
So we went with Rahma International, but Rahma works with WHO and so World Health Organization. Even the paperwork from Rahma itself is like, it's not their responsibility. They will take you there, but if you get killed, it's not anybody's responsibility. It's my responsibility. So besides the fear of being killed, but also there's an opportunity that I may be maimed and I may never be able to get out of Gaza, which is fine by me. I'd rather be there because I know I'm needed. But it's a very deadly situation for healthcare workers. a lot of health, as you said earlier, a lot of professors, a lot of educators, a lot of healthcare providers, journalists have been killed by Israeli forces during this genocide. So my fear is that what is going to happen in the future of any conflict around the world, everybody is going to be fair and square to be killed. These Israeli armed forces have no rules or humanitarian reasons to protect anyone. They kill anything that moves.
Right. And this is really a big concern for people in the human rights community and the humanitarian law and international law community, that with this lack of accountability that we're seeing, we've been seeing it for many years, but particularly in the last year, with all the documented war crimes that we're seeing, the inability to stop Israel is really putting into question the legitimacy and the force of the international community and whether they can bring about a difference or a change. Of course, in this case, we're not just dealing with the Israel, but we're also dealing with the United States and the inability of the State Department to put an end to this and to humanize the Palestinian population, to humanize a population of Arabs that have been living under blockade for many years now in Gaza. So you and your colleagues on the mission returned to your jobs in healthcare in America after 6 weeks in Gaza. Can you talk about what you faced when you came back? Did you face any challenges, any pushback?
Yes, it is a challenge. For one, because challenge number one is that here at home, I have every equipment, every supply, every provider is available at my disposal to if I need something for my patients, right? And I have abundance of everything I need. So while in Gaza, I didn't have gauze. I had patients who bled to death in my arms because I couldn't stop the bleeding. I had patients that I saw pus coming out of their IV catheters. And we did not have equipment to test what kind of bacterial infection that was in it. We didn't have tourniquets, for example. When we had mass casualties come in after an Israeli strike, a lot of people are bleeding to death. We didn't have enough of that. We brought some for ourselves to help, but we left them there. However, if you look at what we have here and what I didn't have in Gaza, it is very disheartening. It makes me angry to think of just to leave some people on earth to die in misery and death and destruction when I have everything I have and I need in this country as a healthcare provider. So I think that's really the biggest challenge, number one. Number two is the challenge about a colleague told me, I told the colleague, I said, I just came back from Gaza. And the colleague said, that's a very controversial mission work. I thought, you are a healthcare provider.
Right.
How can it be controversial to help a child, a man or a woman that has been injured or maimed or is dying from a severe bleed anywhere in the world, whether in Gaza or Ukraine or Sudan or Congo, anywhere? Why is that controversial? We took an oath to protect all life, the sanctity of all life. It's not just, I thought this healthcare provider has their own personal biases and racism, or that Palestinian people are not human.
Right.
Palestinians do not deserve to be loved or cared for or protected or treated when they are dying.
Mm-hmm.
So that told me this person has deep-rooted racism or anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, or anti-Black and brown people, for that matter.
Right. And like you say, at its core, racism is about dehumanization. It's about not viewing groups, like just taking entire groups of people and not viewing them as equally human and worthy of the same rights that you think you are worthy of. So the fact that a medical mission, when we know that more than 40,000 civilians are now dead, murdered in Gaza, when we know that 16,000 children at least, and those are the low estimates. And I know you and your colleagues in the medical profession have had different estimates that have placed the number, higher than 100,000. The Lancet has placed the number at 186,000 a few months ago. So within this context of immense loss of life and loss of life amongst children, to think that a medical mission within this context is controversial, that tells you so much about how Palestinians are being viewed, at least many people in the US.
Exactly, Hiba. And to piggyback on what you just said, Hiba, is that we had, I'm not sure if you guys have seen this, but a nurse in New York that was fired because, she has spoken against the genocide going on in Gaza. But previously, she was actually awarded one of the best awards in nursing about that she's being the best, nurse in her hospital. But then the second she opened her mouth about the genocide going on, she was never needed anymore because she is pro-Palestine. To add on to that, the medical profession has been silent. I think every healthcare worker, every public health worker, everyone that has human soul in healthcare or anybody out there that cares enough about the life and sanctity of all people, they need to be screaming about this because we cannot afford to be complicit to the genocide. And of course, the other challenge in this country is the media coverage. The Palestinian people have always been, voices have been silenced. Nobody cares. And they will not be even mentioned. It will be mentioned if they did, if the Palestinian people are mentioned, by the way, it's on the side of the Israeli forces. Imagine how many times, if you look at our media, in this country, mainstream media especially, how many times Netanyahu has been on our mainstream media? How many times the Israeli armed forces personnel spokespersons have been on our media? Many, many times. How many times has a Palestinian been on? Just think about that. So the narrative of it's so difficult when I'm in Gaza and people are asking, please tell your people, do not forget us. Do not forget us. We are dying. Israel is killing us. Israel is wiping us off the face of the earth. But please do not forget us. Of course, we know our mainstream media will not care, but we care. That's why we have people like you, Hiba, and the Center for Security Rights, Race and Right, that we have to amplify these voices because my biggest challenge, as you asked earlier, what is my biggest challenge, is our media.
And maybe as a result of that, I know you and your colleagues wrote a letter to President Biden and Vice President Harris, describing a catastrophic situation in Gaza. You estimated about 120,000 deaths at least, and you demanded an immediate arms embargo and an immediate ceasefire. I read through your very powerful letter and the pages upon pages of appendices and evidence that you, American healthcare workers who went to Gaza, added to the letter. And I saw that you end your letter with a very simple appeal. You say, end this madness now. Can you talk about this letter and what you want to convey with it?
We have given our tax dollars $17.9 billion in just 1 year. Those are your taxes used to kill children, men and women in Gaza.
The $17.9 billion are the amount of military aid that Israel has received from October to October.
Correct. And the total of all this genocide that we have sponsored is almost $40 billion. Now, the Biden-Harris administration have funded this. They have the leverage to stop this madness, but they haven't. The United States has vetoed 4 United Nations Security Council resolutions. Those resolutions called for ceasefire, but we stopped it. Biden-Harris administration stopped those. And that to me speaks volumes of our values. We have to stop this madness. And also healthcare workers are afraid to speak up about Gaza because they're silencing or pro-Palestinian voices. This anti-Palestinian racism creates a climate of silence and complicity and intimidation with accusation of anti-Semitism if we speak against Israel.
That's right. And so with that letter, you wanted to provide more and more and more evidence to the Biden administration, but also make it clear that as healthcare professionals, you really call for and demand the immediate arms embargo on arms to Israel and an immediate ceasefire. Did you find any response from the mainstream media to your letter? Do you think it's being taken seriously?
It's very hard to get anything out of this White House or United States mainstream media because, as we said earlier, the Palestinian voices silenced. They don't matter. Yes, to some extent, we have gotten some kind of responses from, local media or some. Now, the last day or so, there have been some national media coming to search for us. But after reading the letter, and there's a New York Times magazine describing the atrocities that we saw, the death that we saw, the calling on American people, because I really do not know that this White House, Harris and Biden administration have any leverage they want to use on stopping this madness. I think it is the American people that will have to stop this. The media that has been complicit for so long needs to stop this, needs to share stories of the Palestinian people. Yes, so we got in a little bit of headlines, but not enough. It's been a whole year. And why does it have to take 42,000 confirmed killings by Israel or the Palestinian people? And the ones that, according to Lancet, we have about almost 186 that are still unaccounted for. Why does it have to take that long for so many people to be killed by Israel?
Right.
Why is Israel allowed to be this rogue state that can do whatever it wants with our tax dollars? When will this madness stop? When will American moral consciousness wake up and say, enough is enough killing children in Gaza with our taxpayers' money? After World War II, we said, enough is enough. Never again.
After the Holocaust, we said never again.
Never again. But look at how short-sighted we are, how our memory is so convoluted with hatred and racism towards Black and brown people that have been suffering tremendously. So why is it that it happened in Rwanda? Why is it happening in Palestine for 76 years in Palestine?
Right.
76 years. And we fund it. And you cannot tell me and call Israel a democracy. Democracies don't occupy people and kill people, innocent civilians, children. There's no democracy there.
Right. There's an ethno-national state that is currently making any peaceful resolution impossible by occupying Gaza, really digging deeper with settlement of the West Bank. And of course, what the media has often portrayed in the last month as a limited ground operation into Lebanon is really an invasion of Lebanon. It's a bombardment of heavily occupied civilian cities and towns across Lebanon. It's not just the south. Beirut has been heavily bombarded. And again, there is this total blackout. Any mention of suffering, any humanizing stories. We hear a lot of humanizing stories about Israeli hostages, and rightly so. But where are the humanizing stories about all those children in Gaza that have been killed? All 17,000 children, according to the organization 17,000 Children, according to Save the Children, who have lost parents in Gaza, who are now orphans, parents who lost their children. We don't see this kind of humanization. And if anything, it is the deep anti-Arab sentiment and the deep Islamophobia, and of course, a lot of ongoing racism against brown and Black people that makes some lives, worthier than others, and some lives just worth a full humane story, and others don't even make it to the headlines.
Do you remember, Hiba, this summer when Israeli special forces went and rescued 3 hostages in Gaza, Israeli hostages,
Yeah.
but ended up killing
more than 200
Palestinians? Right. But in our media, the big story was Israeli rescued mission work, which I'm okay. It's great that these Israeli hostages returned home safely. But there was no mention of the Palestinians that have been killed. No one questioned the morality of killing over 200 people, Palestinian people, in a refugee camp, saving lives of 3 people. Nobody questioned that morality.
Or very few people questioned that, but mainstream media ran with it and made it into a rescue operation. We should all be very alarmed that hospitals have continuously been bombarded in Gaza and are now bombarded in Lebanon. 10 hospitals at least are now out of service in Lebanon. And every hospital has been bombarded in Gaza, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Willie.
Correct.
No hospital was spared. The airstrikes, the invasion, just a combination of different assaults.
Yes, absolutely, Hiba. Because one of the hospitals I worked at was Indonesian hospital in North Gaza. Half of that hospital, the east side of it, is completely destroyed. I have images and pictures that if Center for Security, Race and Rights want to post on their website, I'll share that. Shifa Hospital that I was very close to, I've been to Shifa before this genocide, completely destroyed. Kamal Adwan, that is very close to Shifa, to Indonesian hospital, destroyed. And I was also down in South Gaza at Nasser Hospital. And, the Israeli forces even took solar panels on top of the hospital. Why? Because electricity was cut off, remember? And now they're going to take solar panels and there's no water.
So they basically removed the solar panels.
Yes. And also, right in front of Nasser Hospital, the dialysis center that the Israeli forces destroyed it. They used it at first as their command center, but then right after they left, before they left, they burned dialysis machines. So patients in Gaza are not only dying from Israeli airstrikes or being shot by Israeli snipers and soldiers, but these innocent people are also dying of other diseases like kidney patients. They're dying. There is no dialysis machines in Gaza. There's only one CT scan in Gaza because the Israeli forces, before they left these hospitals, they destroyed everything. They burned it down. They shot them. EKG machine that looks at your heart. I saw them at an Indonesian hospital, burnt. They even burnt printers. Israeli soldiers burnt printers. Think about that.
What's the military
purpose?
Rationale? What is the military purpose from burning printers, taking away dialysis machines and destroying them, removing solar panels? It's just making sure that the healthcare system
is dismantled.
Yeah.
And another aspect is that Shifa Hospital was one of the only one heart catheterization in Gaza. Anybody who needed a procedure for their heart, that center was destroyed. One of the providers that was working at Shifa Hospital worked with me at Indonesian Hospital. When he worked there, he was collecting boxes that were from the donated goods. He was taking them home so that his family can use the boxes to cook. This is a specialist. This is a cardiologist, well respected. He's good at what he does. But Israeli military destroyed the unit completely. In front of Nasser Hospital, to this day, you'll see mangled up ambulances. I think they were run by Israeli tanks or bombed by their quadcopters or by their tanks, shot by their tanks. Ambulances shot. They're mangled. I counted about 25 ambulances next to that mass grave that was discovered at Nasser Hospital after Israeli forces had left. Over 500 people were found in that mass grave. So
that's horrible.
This genocide has no limit as far as Israeli is concerned. They'll kill, they'll maim, and destroy anything that moves.
And there is absolutely no accountability, at least so far. Racism that enables these sorts of abuses that are usually thought of as impossible. Like you can enter wars, absolutely, but you're not going to target hospitals and medical personnel. You're not going to kill children. You don't expect people to kill children. But the type of racism that makes us able to swallow and accept and even not talk about the children that are being killed, the medical equipment that are being destroyed, the hospitals that are being struck with Israeli airstrikes, that racism is intersecting with our basic right to health and our basic right to life. And I wanted to ask you if you think that anti-Black, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab racism in the United States here is connected to the type of abuses that we've seen and we continue to see in countries such as Gaza and Lebanon, and of course, Sudan and Congo and Yemen and elsewhere.
Yes, good question, Hiba. Infant mortality rate for Black children is double that of national average.
In the United States.
In the United States.
Yeah.
Maternal mortality of Native American women is twice of white women, and the maternal mortality of Black American women is 3 times more of that white women. And large life expectancy gaps by race is also very evident, For example, Native Americans live 7 years less on average than white Americans. And there are also 4 years less for Black Americans. Black Americans, men die more of, like prostate cancer colon cancer more than any other race because it's the diagnostic system they don't get diagnosed early enough. By the time they get diagnosed because of socioeconomic problems, it's too late. Uninsured rates are highest among Native Americans and Black Americans and Latino Americans. Issues of chronic health diseases prevalence among Black Americans and Native Americans, the highest, like diabetes, hypertension, those kind of diseases. And persons of color have the lowest access to primary care. And this leads to higher rates of preventable deaths from things like colon cancers, for example, breast cancer, for example, for Black and brown women. So these chronic diseases are more prevalent and more deadly because why is that for Black and brown people? Because of the long-term socioeconomic disadvantages they've had for centuries. That it's hard for them to catch up. It's very difficult.
Right. And this question of access to health is really at the core of what's happening in Gaza today, because a lot of the estimates, especially coming from respected medical journals like The Lancet, from medical professionals like Willie and his colleagues, and what they provided in their letter to the Biden administration, what they're showing is that the majority of loss of life is going to be the result of preventable diseases. It's going to be the result of starvation. And that's very much in line with what wars in general produce. But it's expected to be much higher than what we usually expect in wars, simply because there has been a concerted effort on the side of the Israeli military to target medical equipment, blockade. Again, all of that has been evidenced by the United Nations and virtually every respected human rights organization, such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Willie, I'm very thankful to you for delving into such a personal story. And my last question to you is, you are a Pan-Africanist, and I am myself as well. You're very outspoken about settler colonialism and about white supremacy. Can you comment on how you relate to Gaza as an Africanist, as an African Black American, as well as a Muslim convert?
Our ancestors, my grandparents, fought colonialism, German colonialism and British colonialism. And both of our ancestors, our grandparents fought the war for freedom. Tanzania got independence in 1961 from the British rule. We were called the same names that today the Palestinian people are called: terrorists, savages, beasts, uncivilized. Those are the same things that we heard from our people. Colonialism is similar everywhere. But the one in Gaza right now is a lot more deadly because they are being massacred as we speak. Yes, the Germans massacred people in Namibia. They massacred people in Tanzania. They massacred people in the British did the same thing. The British monarchy, they killed a lot of people. But after World War II, and after a lot of African countries have gotten independence from colonial powers, we thought this should not happen again. We have some kind of international rules and norms. But when it comes to Israel, those don't matter. Israel does whatever it wants. And African people and native people everywhere, even here in the United States, we associate ourselves with Palestine because as indigenous people, we know we have our lived experiences of colonialism and dehumanization.
Right.
We are proud of South Africa and their ICJ case. South Africa is a model campus of our continent in Africa, of the world for that matter, because they know what apartheid means. They know what colonialism means. They just experience. And Nelson Mandela said, our freedom is incomplete until Palestine is free.
Right.
And that is deeply rooted in the African context of Ubuntu philosophy. I am because you are, and because you are, so we are.
Right.
And that is our African context. And the same thing you will feel when you are in Gaza. You'll see these amazing people, loving people, the kindest humans you can ever meet. They will give you their bread before they feed their children, even though they are starving. They'll feed you before they feed their children, even though they're dying of malnutrition and starvation. They love us. They welcome us even into their tents. They say, welcome home. Be with us. We love you. The same thing that happened in Africa and in other colonized regions today, like in Palestine, that's our story. The kindness and the love of the Palestinian people and the strength and resilience to fight colonialism and hatred and apartheid is the same spirit that we, the African people, fought. And that's why we are one. That's why we and the Palestinian people interconnected. It's in our DNA, the love for life, the dehumanization and being denied by the West, genocides of Africans and native peoples during colonial times. The West has always brushed it off, but the West embraces the colonialism and the massacre and the genocide of the Palestinian people. They're okay with that. Of course, they're okay with that. They did the same to us.
And there was no accountability in our cases either.
No.
There was no accountability for the German genocide in Namibia. There is no accountability for the genocide of the Congolese.
No.
King Leopold II of Belgium killed about 10 million Congolese men and women and children. 10 million people. Accountability? No, none, barely even recognized. Thank you so much, Willie. Thank you for being with us today, for opening up about a deeply personal experience from a very difficult setting. It's literally from the heart of the genocide. I'm very thankful for your time. It's been deeply painful, but it's also hopefully rewarding to our audience. This has been Willie Masai, an Tanzanian-American, Muslim-American nurse and medic from Omaha, Nebraska, about his time 6 weeks on a medical mission in North and South Gaza. Just a few weeks ago, he returned and was ready to share his story.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Race and Rights podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Center for Security, Race, and Rights, housed at Rutgers Law School, also known as the People's Electric Law School. CSRR engages in research, education, and advocacy on issues that adversely impact the civil and human rights of America's diverse Muslim, Arab, and South Asian communities. We do so through an interfaith, cross-racial, and interdisciplinary approach. To hear additional episodes of the Race and Rights podcast, check out our pages on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Now, for a deep dive on these issues, visit our website at csrr.rutgers.edu, where you can find policy reports, teach-ins, and news commentary by our over 130 faculty affiliates. To watch our over 80 academic and public policy lectures, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Rutgers Center for Security, Race, and Rights. And on social media, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rutgers CSRR and on Twitter and Facebook at RUCSRR. Finally, you can financially support the Center for Security, Race, and Rights by going to our website at csrr.rutgers.edu and press the donate button. And please give generously. As always, be well and see you next time.